Welcome everyone to this video segment in Module 9 in our course Introduction to Spirituality. This segment on Chapter 8 of Louis Bouyer's book, Introduction to the Spiritual Life. This definitely is one of my most favorite chapters of the book. It's really tremendous, very extensive treatment of monastic spirituality and this full flowering of the ascetic life within the monastic vocation. So as a married man, I can't help but find myself a little envious of the privilege of the monks, the nuns, the monastic life, to go into the desert. I really would enjoy that experience sometime. See what that's like to go out into the desert, go live in a cave, even for one night. It's probably a little terrifying, but in any case, it's just this kind of, real ideal image of Christian discipleship, living out the perfection of the evangelical counsels, which results in the perfection of charity. So it's a tremendous chapter. I really can't get enough of it, and I have several notes to talk through in this video, which I will try to keep under 15 minutes. But first, page 236, Bouyer makes the interesting point that in canon law, there's no specific mention of monks or monastic life specifically, even though there's reference to religious life, more generally speaking. So that I found kind of interesting in passing. And then on page 237, we have this paradox in monastic life of, on one hand, it involves a flight from the world, a taking leave of everything in the world, family, former friends, possessions, ambition, self-determination, all these things. It's a flight from the world, but also monasticism is concerned for the salvation of the world. Both of these things together. The monk flees the world in order to contribute to the redemption of the world. Even though the world's redeemed in Christ, ultimately, but Jesus calls us to be co-workers with him in the vineyard, and wants to mediate this grace, or we have the whole doctrine of indulgences involving the temporal, or the remission of temporal punishment due to sin, and that all the faithful can participate in this mediation of satisfaction, penitential satisfaction for the sins of the world. Monasticism is a concentration of this vicarious or substitutionary asceticism that we read about previously with saints like Mary Margaret Alacoque talks about this and focus on the Sacred Heart of Jesus, reparation for the sins of the world. Page 239, monasticism involves this Christian renouncement as a preparation for martyrdom. Its origins are this. When martyrdom was nearby, asceticism prepares us for that day, that hour, where we give up our lives in the most sublime witness to the truth. Monastic renunciation leads to liberation from the bonds of this world. And a participation in the cross in this present life becomes an anticipation of the resurrection of the future life. On page 241, Bouyer talks about the evangelical counsels in relation to the precepts of Christ, and that the evangelical counsels are not ends in themselves, poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they're a means to an end, which is the full flowering of love, of divine love circulating in the soul. On page 244, Bouyer speaks of monasticism as a nomadic existence. I really like how he puts that. It's a realization of our pilgrim being in this world. We're en route, after all. This is not our final home. It's not our lasting place of living. Monasticism in this nomadic existence involves the eagerness for the desert, where no one can settle down in it. The thing about the desert is ephemeral in itself, and everything that lives there, passes through there. It's not a place where you settle down and you check your mailbox and sit back on the easy chair and all of this. The desert is completely, perfectly unsettling. But it's the perfect place, therefore, to go in search of, to quote from the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament, in search of the city whose foundations are eternal. Then on page 245, Bouyer says that we must go with Christ beyond the flamancia mania mundi, quoting around 1st century BC, around the time of Jesus, Latin poet Lucretius, who talked about the flaming walls of the world. We must go beyond the flaming walls of the world with Christ. On page 248, then, Bouyer references Origen of Alexandria, who talks about how the monks, through the monks, each demon, each separate individual demon, was overcome by a particular ascetic and thereby deprived of his power to disturb other men, other people. So the monk goes to do spiritual combat with the demon, rendering the demon impotent to affect other people. It's a very interesting thing in this monasticism. It's not defensive spirituality, but offensive spirituality. We have the ball as followers of Christ. It's ours to capitalize. It's ours to make the touchdown, to make the basket. We have possession of the ball. We have possession of the game. And as much as Jesus said to St. Peter about his church in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 16, the gates of hell will not prevail against it, which is to say the gates of hell will not prevail against the oncoming church. And so this is incredibly interesting, this rigorous solidarity among people in the spiritual life. And Bouyer references St. Therese of Lisieux and how she showcases this missionary, penitential, and contemplative vocation as a discalced Carmelite. This is the point. We leave the world that the world would be saved, to help the world's salvation come about more effectively through the mediation of divine grace, through the sacramental life of the church, and those who are participating fully in the sacramental life of the church, that it pours out into the world and draws the world in more fully to the church and into the stream of salvation. So this is great stuff. Page 249, we think of the monastery and the monastic communities as an opportunity for all Christians to take leave of the world, even for a little while here and there. Whenever we might pass a monastery in the car, or be able to go there and pray for adoration. I used to live in Canton, Ohio, where Santa Clara Monastery is, where Mother Angelica was a young nun. The Poor Clares, the Franciscans there, and they have a beautiful chapel and adoration during the daytime in a big monstrance. And I remember going there with my wife and kids when we lived there, and to be able to step foot on the monastic grounds, in a sense, you take leave of the world, even as a lay person, for a time. Something similar could be said about a parish church or retreat centers, things like this. But the monastic community itself, that day and night lived existence set apart from the world, is really beautiful. Even that lay people are able to go there sometimes, like say Gethsemane Monastery in Kentucky, and just take some refuge for a time and grow in the life of prayer. Page 250, I like how Bouyer talks about at Pentecost in this upper room, Mary is in the midst, and that makes all the difference for the Christian community. So it's like what monasticism is to the church, Mary was to the earliest church at Pentecost. So the Marian monastic presence in the world spurs on all the faithful to missionary discipleship and evangelization, going out, proclaiming the good news of Christ to draw people into the fold of faith. Page 252, the ascetic is a person who is fundamentally awake, Bouyer says. And this loss of self that results in the spiritual wakefulness is assured by the vow of obedience. It's very interesting. But I love how Bouyer puts these things. He's really a master at gathering up all of these meanings surrounding monasticism in this chapter. But the ascetic is a person fundamentally awake. And then 254, Bouyer talks about monasticism as a perpetual spiritual combat, to be delivered from our captivity to the demon. Deliverance, the theological concept of deliverance is huge for Catholic theology and spirituality. And deliverance, deliverance from demonic influence, deliverance from bondage, deliverance from habits of vice. This is all necessary in the Christian walk. Page 256 then, thinking about sin, sin, Bouyer says, is spiritual in its final substance. So sin, because it involves an act of the will, which is one of the higher faculties of the human soul, sin is spiritual in its substance, and it must be undone spiritually. So any remedies that are only addressing physical needs, even in terms of diet and exercise and sleep or whatever, like these are helpful, but we have to get to the root of our problems as human beings, which is in the spiritual life. It's in the department of the soul, so to speak. And so sin must be overcome by conversion of the will away from the primordial renunciation we call original sin. Page 258, Bouyer talks about how the monks bury themselves in the desert to confront Satan in his final hiding places. Very well put there. Again, it's these disciples of Jesus on the offensive. We're going to go find Satan. We're going to confront him. We're going to go find the demons. We're going to confront them in the last frontier of their hiding places. So he talks about how humans were put into the world, first with the first humans, Adam and Eve, the first man and woman. Humanity is put into the world to confront the prince of the world, who already was around, who already had fallen, as well as the other fallen angels. And so humanity, this is really beautiful how Bouyer puts it, is talked about humanity placed in the world, again, on the offensive, not to just be trampled by the demons, but to trample the serpent underfoot. Thanks be to God through the Blessed Virgin Mary, above all in her Immaculate Conception. Finally, 260, 263, 266, Bouyer talks about how solitude affords the occasion of the supreme spiritual battle. So he's talking about this for all of us to become spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers, to hold the responsibility of other people who are facing us in our spiritual care. Whatever state of life we're in, this is the vocation as we mature spiritually. And so solitude is the way that we confront the demons directly. And it's not just so we have some rest and relaxation, which is nice, but realize that we plunge into the battle intentionally in order to confront the demons that are assaulting us on a daily basis. And this is the baptismal call. It remains with us the rest of our life with Christ. And we have to take it seriously. We have all the weapons needed at our disposal. And the treasury of the church, all the prayers of indulgence, prayers of deliverance, above all the sacraments, but all the models, the lives of the saints, the teachings of the church, everything. The list goes on and on. The devotions, Divine Mercy Chaplet, the powerful prayer of the Rosary, all these things, adoration of Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. We have all the weapons at our disposal to confront the demons. We just have to do it. Thanks be to God. See you on the discussion board.